You're listening to the Chrysalis Podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Zerna. On this podcast, we will be sharing inspiring stories from best-selling authors, coaches, and leaders who aren't afraid of stepping into the unknown and exploring the greatest truths of life. This is your place to turn your breakdowns into your breakthroughs, to live in alignment with your purpose, and to gain the tools of personal mastery through emotional sovereignty. Thank you for being here. Welcome, everybody, to the Chrysalis Podcast. I'm your host, Chelsea Zerna, and today I have a special guest and dear sister, Nadine Lee, who is a teacher of the feminine tantric arts. She's also an feminine embodiment coach and the author of the best-selling book, Priestess. She's the founder of Tantric Alchemy, which is a community devoted to supporting men and women step into authenticity. And she has helped thousands of people over the past decade heal sexual trauma and ignite their erotic fire within, and also to channel that creative energy into their highest creative and sexual expression. So Nadine, thank you so much for being here. It is amazing having you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yes. So we love starting the Chrysalis Podcast with a little bit of story. Obviously, people know your bio, but it's a little bit more important to kind of dive into how you got here. And a huge part of the Chrysalis is talking about the dark night of the soul. And many people go through countless dark night of the soul moments until they really have that kind of like come to Jesus moment or that awakening moment, whatever that is for them. And it kind of just awakens something within and it starts them down this path. So I would love to dive into your story a bit and talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, do you want me to just start with how I got on this journey?
Yeah, I would love to. And I'd love to specifically go into kind of some of the things that were a little bit more tender in your childhood. And I know that you had like a massive experience when you were 14 that really kind of created a huge awakening for you. So let's dive in there.
Yeah. So my journey started quite young. I remember being, 5 or 6 years old and having such a deep connection to both my spirituality and my sexuality. And, I was asking questions like, who is God and how do I meet him? And like, what is the purpose of life at such a young age? And, simultaneously, I was already self-pleasuring and running orgasmic energy through my body. So, this was kind of like my norm at 5 or 6 years old. And I felt really expanded and really at home there and really, shame-free in my sexuality. And, at the age of 7, I experienced sexual abuse from a family friend. So, I was sexually violated. And it was almost like, I was really tapped into this expansive pleasure field and just like the truth of my being. And then it was just kind of squashed and riddled with shame and fear after this specific incident. So that kind of sent me into a contraction field, and obviously being so young and holding shame around this, what happened, I didn't share it with anyone until I was 18.
Wow.
Yeah. So I held this in for, from 11 years, held this inside of me and didn't know how to really talk about it with anyone or share it. So how that manifested was, in all sorts of feelings of disconnection from my body, and disconnection from my sexuality, and shame was like a big part of my sexuality and my being. So shame about what happened, and then shame about like not wanting to share about it. So there was just so much of this riddling me. And, when I was 14, I had an experience that really shaped a lot of what I teach now and my soul's path. And that was, I experienced basically a Kundalini awakening, a rush of energy through my body. And it sent me into this kind of mindless state for 3 days straight. And how I kind of explain it is how you feel when you take a psychedelic or, you smoke some weed and you start to leave your body and you go into that blank state and the mindless state, usually for a trip last, like 8 hours?
Yeah.
This was 3 days of that.
Wow.
And I hadn't taken any drugs or anything. It was just spontaneous. And that was a really powerful, pivotal moment for me in my soul's journey. I kind of literally left the body and ascended out. I went into these kind of like upper realms and was almost like in a Satori state, like no mind, for this 3 days. And so after kind of the energy settled and I started coming back into my body, my whole perception of reality was shifted. And it was almost like, when you go on a psychedelic journey, you do have a perception shift of reality and you start questioning, who am I? What is this? What is real? Like everything's just shifted. And so I had that and I had no tools.
At 14.
Yeah.
It's like an identity crisis.
Yeah, it was intense and so scary. And I was asking, I remember asking my mom and my dad, like, what is the meaning of life? Like, who am I? Like, what am I here to do? And it wasn't just like a curiosity. It was like literally an existential crisis. Like, no, I need to know, like, who am I? What am I here? What is real? It was frightening. And the way I kind of dealt with that was I didn't want to go back into that mindless state because it was so scary. So I channeled all of that confusion energy into my mind, to be honest. Like I just went hardcore into my schoolwork and just kept my mind busy. So I didn't have to go back into the no mind. I just wanted to fill my mind with, thoughts and assignments and mathematics and physics and all mental things of the education system. So that kind of saved me in a way. Like I know the education.
It's like protective.
Yeah. It was like, it's like you get into this path trying to escape the mind. But like for me, it was actually a way to protect me and not to literally lose my shit and like lose my mind in a way that, because I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah.
Like I literally was like, I think I need to, go to a psychiatrist. And I was asking my mom, like, can you take me to a psychiatrist? I don't know what's happening. I don't know what this experience was. But she knew like that path was not going to be good for me and that it would end in, putting me on synthetic drugs. And she just didn't want that. So she just held space for it. And like, I coped with, schoolwork. And also I was creating a lot of art, like a lot of visionary art. And I see now, like what I was painting was flowers and wombs and yonis. And it was almost like, it was like my higher self was saying to me, this is what you need to journey with to heal and integrate this experience. So that's kind of like what led me to, in my early 20s, these teachers found me really, like the Tantra, the meditation, the yoga, I was ready to receive those teachers then. And this is when
How did that start? You just kind of had this realization that you wanted to start studying or doing yoga, or?
No, I was 18, 19, just finished school and just was in university. And some of the depression and anxiety was like really coming back, because major life shift of leaving school and, and so I actually did go down the medical route. I went and was seeing a counselor and I went on antidepressants and it just made things worse. And I was like, honestly, it was horrible. Yeah. And so I ended up, I was just like praying for like miracle. And it was like, I think I was walking out of the psychologist session and I came across this yoga studio and they had this like meditation class they were doing that night. And I went to it and I went to that first meditation. We were just doing a simple mantra and I just felt all like myself come back into myself. I felt myself in my body and I was like, wow, this is what I've been seeking, this whole time, is like this connection back and feeling of like sense of connected to my breath, connected to my body. And so I was like, okay, screw the medical system that is not working for me. It can work for some, but for me, it just did not resonate. So
you weren't in your body since you were a child. And then at 14, even more left the body after this Kundalini awakening that probably was so hard to ground.
Yeah.
So it wasn't until you were like 19 that you actually officially started reconnecting with your body.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was just kind of like snowballed from there. I started going to yoga. I attracted a Tantra teacher who ended up being like one of my partners, and I did so much healing and learned so much through him. And then, I went to India and did the ashrams. And it was just like my early 20s were just all about healing and understanding what happened to me. And that's really been kind of the path. And it was just really a way to heal myself. So then, and I didn't actually have any intention to teach what I'm teaching. I just wanted to heal myself and understand what happened. And then it came to a time where I was like, okay, I need to actually help others on this path because I've gone through, the journey. And I just know my journey is about embodiment and bringing this wisdom from the higher realms into the body and the importance of being grounded and like inhabiting our physical vessel.
What does it actually mean for you to be in the body? Like, what is the difference between being disembodied and literally living out of the body? And what does it feel like? And what does it look like to be embodied, like in the body?
Well, for example, if you just look at how you breathe, most people are breathing just in this upper part of their, like very shallow breath. So most of their energy, because the breath is the link between, the body and the spirit, they're breathing just in these upper chakras. So they're just living in their head. Whereas if you start to bring your breath all the way down and your natural breath breathes into the lower belly, this really gives you an indication of if you're actually inhabiting your body. And I remember when I first started doing, this sort of breathing, it was so foreign and so difficult to breathe all the way down. It was just like it felt overwhelming almost. And it took a while and that's part of, the resistance, because, if you have experienced any level of trauma, and it doesn't have to be like sexual abuse, it can be just intense emotions that you didn't resolve at any point in your life, that all of that energy gets stored in your body. So once you start to bring your energy into your body and your breath into your body, you have to feel that again. And it can be intense because it's like, I don't want to feel that, that emotion I suppressed from 10 years ago. It's too much, So there's like a level of the breath and also a level of being comfortable with feeling emotions and intense sensations and feelings. And this is a really big indication. A big indication is also your relationship to your sexuality. So for men, a lot of how it manifests for men, if you're not embodied, is they'll have things like erectile dysfunction or premature ejaculation. For women, it's things like intense periods and like pain, and then the periods that last for 7 days and it's heavy bleeding. Like these are signs of there's not much prana, life force moving in those lower chakras.
I remember when I was in middle school, I was so self-conscious of my breath and I could not take a deep breath. Like I was just like shallow breathing. And I was like, I didn't want to make any noise. I didn't want to make any sound. I was like scared of disrupting. And obviously now it's like the exact opposite. But back then I remember feeling like pretty disembodied and I had painful periods. And it was like a journey of actually coming back into the body and feeling. And I'm curious for you, you mentioned like trauma, and some people want to leave their body because they have trauma or they don't want to feel what's actually happening. What was your path to kind of healing the trauma that you experienced?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that comes to mind was really understanding, well, I was going to say boundaries, but you need to feel you're actually in your body in order to know what your boundaries are. So for me, it was really starting to become familiar and safe in my body. And that started really with connecting to my menstrual cycle and my womb. So I was like bringing my energy, from these upper chakras and bringing it to the deepest part of me, into my womb. And so starting to, sync with my menstrual cycle, understand my menstrual cycle, connect with the menstrual blood, not wear tampons or pads and actually, wear a menstrual cup and like connect to the blood. And that in itself is such a powerful way for women to directly connect to their body and their sexuality, and their femininity. And that was a huge path. I spent like maybe 2 years on that journey of really connecting to my womb, and every month working with my menstrual cycle and connecting with the blood, like not seeing it as this taboo, so much so many women are just disregarding that time of the month, and they'll just see it as a burden and just charge through and not even like look at the blood or acknowledge it. And this is a symbol that is literally sending to our body that it's kind of rejecting your feminine, because the blood is the elixir of your womb, your sacred feminine portal. And it's so powerful to connect to that, because it reconnects you back to your feminine, and the feminine is the body, it's like the masculine is consciousness, is the mind. So it's important for women, if you want to feel more in the feminine and embodied, that's the first gateway, I feel, is the menstrual cycle. We all have a menstrual cycle, most, and we all have a womb as a female. So it's such a powerful practice. And then I started doing practices like after that, feeling like, okay, I'm more connected to my body. Then I started working with the Taoist Tantric practices, specifically the jade egg. And that was like really powerful too. So it's a crystal egg made out of jade that you insert into your vagina and do certain breathing practices and movement practices. And it actually massages the internal walls of the yoni, of the vagina. And this helps literally massage out tension, which, gets stored there if you've experienced any sort of trauma. Whereas, it's just like any muscle in your body. If we store emotions, we store trauma in our body, in our physical body. It doesn't get stored in our mind. And sexual trauma gets stored in the yoni, in the literal walls of the vagina. So this practice helps massage and, release some of that.
Wow. Yeah, that's super powerful. And I know that you, just from knowing you really have a lot of rituals around your menstrual cycle, where you literally won't work and won't even touch your phone for like 24 to 48 hours.
Yeah.
And it's super firm and an intentional time for you. And I would love to hear a little bit about some of the rituals that you actually do, even the way that you connect with your menstrual blood.
Yeah. You've experienced that. Like we've been traveling the past month, and I'm like, I'm going on my moon, and you don't hear from me for 2 days.
Yeah, for sure. She just off grid completely.
Yes. And it's such an important, that's one of the rituals in itself, is just taking the time to be with yourself. And, when we're bleeding, our hormones are at their lowest of the month. Women's hormones they start here and then they peak when we're ovulating and they come back down. Men's hormones stay flatline. So when our hormones are at the lowest, this is when our energy is the most low, and we're in our most yin energetic, the most feminine receptive. So honoring that as a ritual is literally going yin, going inwards, and not being out at the parties and out socializing. It's just like taking, at least a day. I often say, I was saying to you, even just if it's too hard to take a day, just take a few hours or half a day to start with, of just turn off your phone, be with yourself, do your self-care practices, sleep, meditate, do some yin yoga, do some creative practices. This is the time where I just go so deeply into that yin quality, the creativity, the receiving, just lots of nourishment, getting massages, doing yin yoga, doing creative things like I'll paint or draw or like create a playlist, or, just things that are really ignite my creative spirit. And that's the feminine yin quality. And then, connecting with the blood is nothing too like out there. It's just literally using a menstrual cup and collecting it. And I'll put it in a jar, and, when I've collected a day's worth, I'll just take it out into nature and offer it to the earth. And just, that's a simple ritual of releasing the past month and just getting clear on what I'm letting go of for that month. So then the next cycle can start fresh, and getting clear on what I want to step into in the next month ahead. So it's really a time of, death and rebirth.
Yeah.
And honor, it literally is a time of death and rebirth.
Sure.
So it's a time to honor that. Allow yourself to die to the last month, all the things that aren't serving you, and let your body literally release it. And then you're fresh new cycle starts and you get to step into that each month. And it's so powerful.
I love that. There was a period last year where I was watering the plants with my menstrual blood every month. Yes. And they were like growing like crazy right outside my door. And I was like, this is so important. I feel to connect with nature and actually to put our blood back into nature. Mm-hmm. And I even know that when, thousands of years ago, blood was one of the most sacred parts of rituals. And bringing in specifically menstrual blood, because it is like some of the most potent medicine. I even have friends that drink their menstrual blood and connect with the spirit of their menstrual blood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear a little bit about some of the womb practices, because I know that you did a lot of womb healing work and connecting with your womb for a few years. Like that was your main focus. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear some of your favorite things and what that was for you, like what that was like for you, your journey with your womb.
Yeah. I mean, so there was so many different layers to it, but yeah, first of all, it's connecting with the menstrual cycle, but once you go deeper than that, it's really about connecting with the unconscious. And how I see it is the womb is really this like psychic, like dumping ground almost of anything that is repressed in your unconscious. So anything that you're suppressing in your life, any emotions, it's going to literally get stored in your womb. And this is why if you don't create space, to feel your emotions and each month and feel, because the premenstrual syndrome, it's not a syndrome. It's literally your unconscious is trying to signal to you, hey, listen to me, feel this emotion, feel this anger, feel this sadness. And if you don't feel that, then it's going to manifest in period pain and cramps and heavier periods. So when I went deeper into that, it was really a journey of just going deeper into, some of these suppressed emotions, some of the anger, rage was a big one. This is a big one for so many women. It's
for sure.
We're so conditioned to, not show that side of us. Even for men, it's everyone. So really going into allowing myself to express and release some of these more intense emotions, anger, rage, resentment, grief, like really going into it. And that was a journey. And I see that as really exploring my shadow.
Around the time of your moon.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Because it's showing you what's there in your unconscious. Mm-hmm. And you'll notice like certain themes like come up each month. Like, if you're in a partnership, you get like maybe the same fight happens every premenstrual. And it's because that's like a core, theme maybe from your childhood that needs to be felt fully so it can clear.
For sure. Yeah. And I really love the way that relationships come into this, because men, their cycles are in a 24-hour cycle and women are in a 28-day cycle. So men and women operate in completely different cycles and waves of energy. And I think it's really powerful when a man understands a woman's cycle and can really work with her energy and knows when she is at high energy or low energy or, about to bleed, or she's currently on her cycle. And I actually think that it connects partners even deeper when a man is like tuned in. Yeah. Have you kind of worked with men at all with that type of work?
Yeah, for sure. That's a big part of, educating the men, just understanding, the cycle and how they can support the woman. And obviously it's the number one contraception as well. Like when your woman's ovulating, obviously you're going to be, more careful around those days. And it's like, it just creates so much more connection between the couple instead of him just being like left in the dark of like her having an emotional storm. And he's just like, what the fuck's going on? At least he's like, oh, I can see her calendar. She's, premenstrual. I'm going to just, hold space for her, maybe like even give her some space, ask her what she needs. And because that's the last thing you want as a woman is like when you're feeling emotion and then the man to just like peace out or like shame you for it. Or so it starts with this, just educating yourself as a man and understanding women go through these cycles. And because you're in the masculine, it's a gift because you don't have such fluctuating hormones. So you can actually provide that masculine energy. And I've always found with my partners when I'm in my bleeding phase, because I'm so in my yin, so in my feminine, like the peak of the feminine, it enhances him in his masculine pole. Yeah. And he'll just be like, it's like the energetic just gets created and he'll just be like even more in his masculine when I'm bleeding. He's like going out, like crushing business, like closing deals. And then he comes home and he's like brought me a meal home. And, I've seen that in part with my partners, previous partners. And yeah, it's amazing to play with that.
Yes. And part of this journey, I know for me at least, was a lot about dance. And dance was kind of like my tool for getting into my body and feeling so liberated and so free in my expression and removing all these walls of judgment and shame that I had, especially around being seen, especially being seen in my sexuality, especially, allowing myself to really get into my body. And for a while, I had a lot of fear around being seen in that space in public, for reasons of like not wanting to get hit on, or not wanting men to take it the wrong way, or not wanting women to feel jealous, or like so many reasons. And it was a massive breakthrough when I was able to really get in touch with my body. And I'm curious what your journey with dance is, because I know that, you're an incredible dancer and it's obviously like medicine now for all of us in our beautiful sisterhood. But yeah, I'm curious what that was like for you. And if you had any like specific tools that really helped you get deep into your liberation and your almost like sexual freedom.
Yes. Yeah. Dance was a big one. Like, so I came from a gymnastics background. I know we share this.
Yeah.
And, it was all about perfection. And then I kind of transferred. I did some dance as well in my teenage years. But I would do, jazz, tap and ballet classes. And it was always about perfection. And I just did not gel with choreography. So I just kind of accepted I'm not a dancer. Like I don't dance. And then I found, when I started with the Tantra and with the meditation and yoga in my early 20s, I found 5 rhythms. That was my first gateway. And that's a free flow dance modality where you dance through 5 rhythms, literally like waves of emotions, and it's free flow. So I started that and I was like, oh my God, I can dance. I just don't do this whole like choreograph thing. I just need to express myself. And so that was huge for me, like a huge opening. And yeah, from there, it's just been just deepening into it's just such a powerful modality. Just find your own expression, literally find your own dance. And it's such a big one of being in the body as well, a big indicator. Like we were just recently at it was like a club in Portugal, and we noticed most people were drinking alcohol and just kind of like bobbing around. And you and I and another girl, we were like just fully like expressed, and everyone was just looking at us like, whoa, like are you girls on drugs? Like they assumed we're on drugs because we were so expressed. And it's just such an indication of like, needing to drink alcohol in order to feel in your body and to dance. And
for sure.
Yeah, it's a journey,
Yeah. And actually a big part of my awakening in a sense, or just like liberation, really, if we don't even want to use that word, was not drinking alcohol. And I remember when I was like, it was my 24th birthday. And I ended up going on this boat, and I was celebrating my birthday with all my friends, and I ended up getting wasted and like puking off the side of the boat. And I remember being like, wow, I just flew all the way here. I got on this boat and I just drank alcohol so that I could feel free and have fun. And now I'm puking. And I remember like after that trip, we decided we were going to do this 30-day challenge of like no alcohol, like no sugar. It was called the Whole 30. And it was so transformational. I ended up changing my entire friend group after that 30 days. and literally like doing totally different things with my weekends from that weekend on, or from that month on. And it was like the beginning of my kind of like journey into this path. I'm curious, like if you had like an experience with that as well.
Yes. Yeah. Alcohol was my drug of choice. Yeah. I started drinking when I was 14 or 13, I think. And
wow. Yeah. Right after the Kundalini awakening.
Yeah. It was that was one of the ways I also coped. And, alcohol actually there's like different drugs that balance out balance out different chakras. And alcohol is actually directly linked with your root chakra. So it pulls you into your root and into like that primal brain, like it's very, I wouldn't say grounding, but I think maybe that's why I was drinking so much, because like, it was like helping me come into my body.
Into the body, yeah.
And that's why, we see people need to drink in order to dance and have fun. So for me, yeah, I really abused alcohol, and it wasn't until I think I was like 20. That was the last time I drank. Like I actually got arrested, and that was my turning point, because I was so drunk. I got kicked out of a race. It was like the races, like the horse races. And wow. I got kicked out, and I got put in a cab to go home. And then I didn't know why I was home. So I went back.
Oh my God.
And then they arrested me for trespassing, because I'd already been evicted. So it was from that point I was like, this is an issue, and I need to stop and do something. That was around the time, I was like finding the yoga and everything. And it's my whole life just took a 180. And it was, I had to literally change my whole friendship group, because it was like, that was how we connected, literally just going out, getting wasted and laughing about it the next day. And it was a pretty lonely time,
For sure. I remember a lot of my friend group, a lot of the relationships and the connections was based around getting wasted on the weekends, going to bars, like getting hit on by guys, and really kind of like being in this complaining energy a lot of the time. And a lot of the relationships that were around me were kind of the same thing. Everyone hated their jobs, made a ton of money, and just didn't know what to do, and just escaped on the weekends. And it took a really, like, obviously like a few of these moments until, I had that like birthday experience. And then after that, when I switched my friend group, it was almost like I was connecting with people that also didn't drink on the weekends. And some of them were even on this path. And then I started surrounding myself with all these different people. And that's really what opened up the spiritual path, because when you're not drinking on the weekend, it's almost like, well, what else can you do to feel free and liberated? And that's where I kind of found like an entirely new community of people that, took me on this like nomadic path, which was kind of like, the beginning of the exploration. Like, what else could there be? What else can I explore? So that was huge. And, I know that now, part of Tantra is, balancing your feminine and masculine. And part of my awakening was actually stepping into my feminine. And, I know that a lot of the work that you do now brings in not just like traditional Tantra, but also like neo-Tantra, and brings in like the sacred sexual energy. So I'm curious how the like sexual energy, what it does with your life force, and kind of how sex has influenced your life. Like, you made it your entire life path. So like, what is it that really kind of like informed your purpose in this life?
Yeah, well, I think overcoming sexual abuse was like, that's a lot of people who teach sacred sexuality, Tantra, often have come from that, not always, but there's usually the hero's journey. Like, there's been something that has disconnected you from that or fragmented you from that, and then you've healed that part of you. That was my journey. So that's really gotten me on the path of teaching this, and inspired to help others also heal if they've experienced sexual trauma. But also my big passion is healing sexual trauma, and also like really redefining what our sexuality is, because our society is so distorted in how we view sexuality. You know, we have porn, which is teaching most people about what sex is, which is the absolute opposite of how powerful this sexual energy is. It's just showing, you know, a man basically abusing a woman, not respecting her at all, and then him constantly just ejaculating and just wasting all of that life force. And so my big passion really is, healing sexual trauma, but also showing people that this is the most powerful force on the planet. It literally creates life. And so if we're not constantly creating life, like creating a baby every month, what else are we creating? And that sexual energy is really responsible for the creation of what you're here to birth, what you're putting out into the world, how you're creating your reality even. You know, it's this sexual energy. And it's not just about literally penis and vagina. It's literally a current of energy that's moving through you at all times. And it's what makes you feel alive and radiant and youthful and vibrant. It's your sexual energy. And it's also called your life force energy or prana or chi, you know, in different traditions, but it's all the same thing. And seeing it in this way, that perception shift around what sexuality is really helps you to respect it a lot more and use it wisely, because it is such a powerful force.
Wow, that's so amazing. And I know that you also do a lot of work with men now, and men specifically with semen retention. And I'd love for you to kind of touch on that, because you kind of mentioned, like, even in the porn industry, it's like this kind of like quick and intense experience, which is like the opposite of Tantra. Tantra is like slow in the body with the breath, like creating an experience of almost like deepening the utmost moment of surrender so that you can have this spiritual experience. And it's just so wild that society has disconnected sexuality and spirituality for so long, and they're so intimately connected. So I'd love for you to talk about kind of like men in this, and also like even your journey with, you know, religion and spirituality, because I know that was huge in your journey.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing for men, you know, so one of the essences of Tantra really is learning how to work with this creative seed potential. So for men, it's your ejaculation. For women, it's our menstrual blood. So essentially, when you do the tantric practices, it reduces the amount of ejaculation that's coming out each month for men, and reduces the amount of blood that women lose through their menstruation, because this is your creative seed potential. It is pure life force. So as a man, if you're ejaculating every day, multiple times a day, you're losing so much of your life force. And for women, you know, if we're not processing our emotions and consciously working with our menstruation, this is when you're bleeding for like 7+ days. And that's losing so much life force. And so these tantric practices actually reverse that flow of energy. So it's not leaking out of you, literally. For men, you learn to sublimate your sexual energy. So that means you can orgasm without ejaculating. So instead of the energy coming out in the form of ejaculation, it actually injaculates. So it comes in and comes up your spine and up into your, you know, your higher centers. And this is where you get to experience these like multidimensional orgasms that just take you to like God, literally. And you're containing your life force and it's fueling you. And this is just like so powerful. And I feel that for the porn industry, it's designed that way to disempower men specifically, to keep them ejaculating and seeing that that's what a man does, you know, and they're obviously ejaculating to the porn. So it's like literally sucking your life force by watching this like crap. It's absolute crap and disgusting. And so there needs to be a re-education around sexuality. And this is where it starts, is just understanding this. Do you want to be, you know, as a man, like depleted, like lacking life and drained of your life force and have no purpose and like feeling aimless and a slave to your sexuality? That's what the porn path, and that path will take you on. Whereas if you start to master your sexuality and circulate it through your body, this is when you step into your full power and your full mastery, and you're in control and master over your sexuality. You choose when, you ejaculate. You're not a slave to it. And that's the most powerful thing to have as a man, sexual sovereignty.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Really, for both women and men. It's like all of society has kind of shamed and repressed sexuality so deeply that a lot of women, especially when they're really connected to religion and specifically Christianity, there's so many beliefs around sexuality, and that just really disempowers and disconnects people. And people think that it's wrong, or they think that they are wrong for having sex, or that this entire, our life force is literally created through sexuality. And so it's almost like, we're being disconnected from our essential life force energy and just feeling sensual with life. And I know that you had also a journey with Christianity in a way, right? And kind of like a religious upbringing a bit.
I mean, I went to an all-girls school run by nuns, and the principal was a nun. And, all the nuns lived on the convent in the school, but, I wasn't like raised hardcore Catholic. We went to church like maybe once every 2 weeks, but it wasn't like indoctrinated into me. And I felt like I had choice. So I wouldn't say like I was conditioned into the Christianity path, like, even though, I was surrounded by nuns and Catholic school. We didn't even learn Christianity at school. We studied studies of religion, which was actually, we studied Buddhism, we studied Islam, That's it was beautiful. Actually like interesting that they didn't really indoctrinate us at school.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think along, the path of just kind of deepening sexuality, we deepen our spirituality naturally. It's almost like the two are so intimately connected. The way that I see it is when we reach the state of orgasm, we're actually in the deepest state of surrender, and we're the most open to receiving. And that's usually when we're the most connected to God and spirit, when we're so open and kind of receiving of the universe itself. And so, and for men, it's similar, they're in the place of penetrating life and just like creating life force with their entire physical being. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So I would love to hear a little bit about your book, Sex Priestess, because I know this was a massive accomplishment to publish a book out into the world and to tell your story so vulnerably and literally so intimately. And I'd love to just hear a little bit about your book.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what we've talked about today is touched upon in the book. It's like I talk about my journey, like what got me on this path, and really go into that in detail, a lot more than obviously what we've shared here. And then how I've kind of worked it is, it's like there's 6 codes of the Sex Priestess. And it's really just the 6 kind of key teachings that I personally went through my journey of unlocking the Sex Priestess, which to me is, the woman who has integrated her sexuality and spirituality, and now she's serving her dharma and living in her highest creative expression. And so, like I just take the reader on a journey through that and share about my experience, teachings around the core codes, and then practices that you can actually do. So I take you through, the womb practices, some self-pleasure practices, jade egg practices, and really just, it's like a good gateway into this work.
I love it. Yes, it's like a reclamation of the feminine in so many ways. It's so beautiful.
Yes.
And obviously, Nadine is a teacher in our Metamorphosis program. She is the master coach of Stage 4 and helping women really become embodied and really claim their sexuality and kind of go into their bodies a little bit more. And if people wanted to reach you and work with you, what is the best way that they can do that?
Yeah, I would say the first is to get a copy of the book. So it's called Sex Priestess. It's on Amazon. And then the next step is joining one of my online courses, the self-paced courses. The Creatress is the first one for, connecting with your womb and your menstrual cycle. And then there's Pleasure Principles, which is a self-pleasure course and teaching you the jade egg. And I offer in-person events and workshops and retreats around the world. I've got a retreat coming up in Greece in October. But staying connected on Instagram as well, Tantric Alchemy Official.
Beautiful. Amazing, Nadine. So I would love to just end with some sort of words of advice for women that feel disconnected from their sexuality, from their bodies, from their pleasure, from, just like really feeling free and comfortable in their own body. What would you say to them?
Yeah. I mean, I think the first thing is not to compare to anyone else's expression of their sexuality, because it's a very personal journey, and the way that you express your eros and your sexuality and your femininity even is really unique to you. So, a lot of the work I do is really guiding you into your body and your expression. It's not just 5-step process and copy and paste, like how I do it or how someone else does it. It's really just understanding like this is a personal journey and not going into comparison, because we have enough of that, as women, in the mainstream, and just being brave, to go there and knowing that it's going to transform your life and things are going to change, but they're going to change for the better.
I love that, Nadine. Amazing. Thank you so much for being on the Chrysalis podcast and for joining us here in Holland. We are currently in Estonia right now. And for everybody listening, if you love this podcast, you can go ahead and subscribe to the podcast, follow Nadine, follow Chrysalis Space, join us on this journey. We have incredible master coaches that are going to be joining us for the rest of the season on this podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.